And as we look at these pictures, it is notable that none of these officers are wearing masks. And I am just thinking, like, we're in the middle still of a major pandemic. So that is striking to me when we talk about public safety, that they aren't wearing masks. We understand perhaps some masks are being passed out. We'll continue to look at these pictures and see what's going on here. When you talk about reform, and here we are again in Washington, D.C., where you can see people in the streets as far as the eye can see in this overhead view. We know there are multiple protests happening in that city at this hour, with thousands of people turning out, lifting up their voices, protesting against police brutality and against racism, demanding justice and equality in this country. Now let's head to New York. And another protest underway at this hour. We checked in with Evan McMorris-Santoro in just the last block. He was in Brooklyn. Our Bill Weir is in Lower Manhattan. Bill, you've been following along with protests there within this group today. Fill us in on what's happening there. It looks like, is this a confrontation or some kind of face-off with police?
Exactly, Anna. Yeah, we've rebased now. We're down in Lower Manhattan near Canal Street, right as the Manhattan side of the Manhattan Bridge. And there are protesters here squared off with a unit of NYPD. This is definitely a much more tense setting than we've seen all day. The marches through from Washington Square Park with Jon Batiste and the musicians was very light. People were singing Whitney Houston songs, and police, NYPD, were dancing alongside as they passed. This is much more tense. There are gentlemen heckling the officers there. You can see the one officer, did he leave in the, okay, towards the back of Elio, if you see. The guys in the white shirts are the commanders. Overnight, 4 commanders were reassigned as punishment for their actions during the early George Floyd protests. You might have seen viral video of one pushing a woman down in the street violently, another dropping a man's mask and pepper spraying him in the face. Those 4 officers still on the force, but being reprimanded by being reassigned now. Also, news that has come out is Governor Cuomo is recalling, actually re-amplifying his call for police reform called the Say Their Name reform agenda, in which he's proposing allowing for better transparency, releasing the disciplinary records of officers right now that is locked away, banning chokeholds from law enforcement officers, making a false 911 race-based call for emergency a crime, and designating the Attorney General as an independent prosecutor for matters relating to the death of unarmed civilians. So the pressure is reaching the State House in Albany to call for reform after Mayor de Blasio and Governor Cuomo spent much of the last week defending the restraint of the NYPD. But their response through the week has sort of evolved. Early on, they were using they're backing away, much to the cheers of the crowd. And this is a small group of protesters. There's only a couple dozen here, but apparently they got the word that it's not worth this sort of blinking contest. Now cries of quit your job as those officers walk away. This is such a different feel than I saw most of the day following the protests around the city. As we get closer to the 8 o'clock curfew, it'll be interesting to see how many of the thousands who took to the streets on this beautiful Saturday will stay, break that curfew, and how different commanders in different parts of the city might respond.
Bill, it was such an interesting moment that you just showed us there as the police really just turned and walked away after seeing. Do we know why they decided to turn around? Was there an order or a command given by one of those police officers in that crowd, or were you able to hear anything specifically?
I wasn't able to ascertain who gave the command, but yeah, there's a bunch of officers staged in various locations. If you pan to the right over here, this is the entrance to the Manhattan Bridge, which goes over to Brooklyn, which has been the scene of a lot of protests. Now you can see, there's a commander in the white shirt organizing his men and women. These particular officers do have batons and helmets. We haven't seen a lot of that throughout the day. They were really letting protesters move wherever they want, and we're accommodating them by closing off streets But now it looks like really what they're trying to prevent is a protest taking over the Manhattan Bridge.
Okay, so of course the question is
I'm
then,
not sure what's gonna...
Bill, where does this go from here, right?
Absolutely, yeah. It's such a different, scene as we've seen after dark. But there's other news today, Anna, that I should mention. John Miller, who is one of the spokesmen for the NYPD, longtime terrorism expert, he told some of our colleagues today that it was an intelligence failure. The looting that we saw last week and past days was an intelligence failure by the NYPD, that they missed a small band of criminals that was going to take advantage of the protests to loot those stores in Soho, on Fifth Avenue, busting out windows of major chains, as you saw so much of that disturbing video. He really fell on his sword today and said, that's on me. We were watching Facebook chatter, we were data mining, trying to figure out who was going to do the most harm, and we missed it somehow. So that's a pretty stunning admission today from the NYPD.
Everybody has room to learn and grow. Bill, we will keep an eye on your
Absolutely.
Pictures, and we'll come back to you if there's news to break. Thank you for that reporting. Let me turn to our police experts here, because most of the protests we've been seeing so far have been peaceful, joyful even today, which was obviously a very different picture from what we saw this time last weekend. And with us right now is former Boston Police Commissioner Ed Davis and former president of the National Organization of Black Law Enforcement Executives, Cedric Alexander. You both were on air with me live last week, and when we saw images of looting and police cars burning and police using batons, it was such a different tone and scene on the streets, not just in New York, but across the country. Cedric, when we just watched live on our air the image of protesters going face to face with the police, and police not breaking out the batons and pushing them back like we saw last weekend, but instead turning in unison and walking away. What does that moment tell you? What went through your mind?
Well, first of all, I think we need to be clear. That is not a sign of weakness whatsoever. It is a sign of them taking more measured approach. And as these protests continue each and every night, I think we're all beginning to see much more peaceful protesters. So curfews are raised in some cities, and here in New York, I think the commander there made a decision that it was best to move his men and women away, because what you want to do is be able to choose your conflicts much more intelligently and based on the experience that they have gained over the last 11 to 12 days. So that was a good call on their part, and because it certainly does hold down the escalation. But I'm sure and I'm confident that if they need to respond, they will. But I thought that was a very smart move on behalf of that commander.
Ed, I'd like to get your thoughts too.
Well, Anna, I agree completely with Cedric. This is called de-escalation, and it's something we didn't even consider prior to the mid-1990s. But during the Clinton years, we trained a lot of police officers around the country on community policing, and de-escalating the tension is a big part of that. Before that, we were charged with sort of moving forward no matter what. And in this particular instance, you can see de-escalation, and you can see what a tactical retreat means. It's not a giving up. It's not a failure or a surrender. It's simply, is this worth it? And those kind of decisions are being made really well by the NYPD right now.
Cedric, as Bill was just reporting, the New York governor, Andrew Cuomo, introduced this new criminal justice reform bill. Specifically, it's a police reform bill, and the four cornerstones are transparency of prior records of police, no chokeholds, classifying false race-based 911 reports as hate crimes, and he wants the Attorney General to act as an independent prosecutor for police murders. What are your thoughts on this bill? Did he get it right?
Well, I think one thing that is very important, we know that reform is certainly coming, and it's going to be very interesting to see what that looked like. I think Governor Cuomo, with his vision and his ability to assess his own state in terms of what he thinks is necessary, is certainly his call. But it's certainly going to take a lot of conversation with a lot of different people to make sure that in this reform process and whatever packages that are presented, that it is done in a way that's going to be fair to everyone that's involved. But the community is clearly asking for more transparency. And we will see what that looks like in the time to come, in the days and weeks and months to come. And when it comes to outside investigations, particularly with an officer-involved shooting, that is very critical. Oftentimes, and I've been saying that for the last number of years, and that fact, that was one of the recommendations that was made in the 21st Century Task Force report, that anytime you have an officer-involved shooting where there's a death, it should be independently investigated, because there again, it gives the community a sense of transparency and fairness, and I think it's fair to the officers that are involved and the community that's involved.
And as we look at these pictures, it is notable that none of these officers are wearing masks. And I am just thinking, like, we're in the middle still of a major pandemic. So that is striking to me when we talk about public safety, that they aren't wearing masks. We understand perhaps some masks are being passed out. We'll continue to look at these pictures and see what's going on here. When you talk about reform, Ed, let me ask you about this, because the different things we just listed in terms of measures that the governor is wanting to take, yes, they increase transparency. Yes, maybe they prevent violence by saying, and perhaps save lives by saying no chokeholds. Let's hope that that makes a huge difference. But it doesn't get to the root of some of the problem which we've been talking about and which a lot of these protests are about, and that's the systemic racism, too, that is abundant in our society, but it's also in law enforcement, which is also what is fueling some of the action, right? So how do you transform a department and that piece to rid out the racism?
Well, Anna, it's true that there's a problem in police, just as there is in every other segment of society. We're still recruiting from the human race. But what I'm seeing is that the unions and the police membership have to get involved in this. I just did an op-ed in the Boston Globe with Frank Hartman from the Kennedy School, calling on the unions to step up and to police their own. These officers with 18 complaints, like we saw up in Minneapolis, have no place on the police department, and they endanger the well-being of the good officers out there who are trying to do the right thing. So the police can play a major role in this. It's not all outside supervision that will solve this.
What do you think about that, Cedric? Because you talk about some of these reforms and transparency, but what would it take to actually break systemic racism within law enforcement agencies?
Well, I think Ed is absolutely right. It certainly is going to take a concerted effort on part of the unions. It's going to take a concerted effort on part of the elected officials and the chiefs of those organizations. And there are policies that can be put in place. Those policies are going to be reviewed here again in the weeks to come, because Ed is right. We are recruiting from a larger population, the human race. So in that, you're going to sometime attract all types of personalities and people of a variety of backgrounds. But the policies you have in place, the expectations that is set from the top, and accountability is going to be huge in terms of reducing and negating any potential racist attitudes that may exist in that organization.
Cedric Alexander and Ed Davis, thank you for the conversation.
Thank you.
Thank you for having me.
Appreciated. We'll have much more still to come as protesters call for justice, police reform, and equality in the name of Black Americans killed at the hands of police like George Floyd and Breonna Taylor. And these are live images now of the ongoing protests in Washington, D.C.
I recommend Nature Made vitamins because I trust their quality. They were the first to have a vitamin verified by USP, an independent organization that sets strict quality and purity standards.
Nature Made, the #1 pharmacist-recommended vitamin and supplement brand.
Hi, I'm Jay Farner, CEO of Quicken Loans and Rocket Mortgage. During the challenging times we're all experiencing, our top priority is the health and safety of the communities that we serve. And while it's true that things are changing rapidly every day, one thing that will never change is our commitment to giving you the best mortgage experience. We understand that hardships may arise, and we're prepared to help. If you currently work with us and need assistance, contact us at rocketmortgage.com.
Was that your grandfather, leading armies to battle?
Was that your great aunt, keeping armies alive? drafting the plans,
taking the pictures.
Was it your family members who flew,
Who fixed
Who fought,
who rose to the occasion
when the world needed them most?
Find and honor your ancestors who served in World War II. Their stories live on at Ancestry.
Buying a car from Vroom is so easy. All you need is a phone and a finger. Just scroll through amazing hand-picked low-mileage cars and tap to buy. That's it. Buy a car from home and have it delivered contact-free.
At BMW, we know leaving the road wasn't easy, but anticipating our return taught us to appreciate every drive. The exhilaration of the ultimate adventure. Moments spent with your favorite co-pilots. And the freedom to explore just because. Our time to rejoin the road is finally here. Get back on the road with 0.9% financing plus no payments for 90 days.
The most recent CDC recommendations are that all people should wear masks in public, but face masks have been scarce and hard to find. Breathe Pure can now supply masks to people who want to wear them, and these masks are available now. Introducing Breathe Pure's disposable masks. They provide a 3-ply layer to cover your face, nose, and mouth. These masks are in stock now, and you can even get them delivered straight to your door, so you can obey shelter-at-home orders and practice social distancing. These are triple-layer disposable masks. Layer 1 provides separation between your face, mouth, and nose and the world outside. Sometimes we have got to go out in public to get essentials. Layer 2 gives you a second inner layer. Layer 3 completes the design for a mask that is breathable, cool, and comfortable. These masks surround and cover your nose, mouth, and chin. The lightweight design makes them easy to breathe with and easy to wear. The adjustable elastic loops fit all sizes. Great for around the house, working outside, or anytime you want to cover up your nose and mouth. Until now, masks have been scarce and hard to get. Now that the CDC recommends all people wear them in public, it is so important to get them for you and your family. Breathe Pure disposable masks are in stock now. They can be shipped directly to your home. There are no trips to the pharmacy or supermarket necessary. There is no public contact needed. You don't need to go from store to store anymore to find a mask for you and your family. Call or go online and order your Breathe Pure disposable masks now. In this special offer, you can get a pack of 10 for only $19.99. But wait, order now and you can double your offer free. Just pay separate processing and handling. That's 20 masks for only $19.99. Get masks for you and your family delivered straight to your door. Order your Breathe Pure disposable masks now.
To order, call 1-800-919-9387. That's 1-800-919-9387, or simply go to breathepuremask.com. Don't delay, order today.
As we continue to see thousands gather in protests of racial injustice and inequality, the NFL did something it rarely, if ever, does. NFL Commissioner Roger Goodell apologizing and admitting he was wrong for not listening to players earlier on matters of racial injustice and peaceful protest. Now, despite Goodell's apology, many were quick to point out something Goodell didn't say: the name of Colin Kaepernick, the former 49ers quarterback who faced backlash from the league after kneeling during the national anthem to protest police brutality. And joining us now is former NFL wide receiver Dante Stallworth. And Dante, first your reaction when you heard, the apology from Goodell.
I thought it was a good first step. I think obviously a lot of people have the feeling that the NFL does not support the players because they continue to fail to mention Colin Kaepernick's name. And the fact that, a lot of the owners still to this day support Donald Trump, support him financially, support him politically. I think a lot of the players are fed up, and especially they feel like that since the president has attacked players, calling them sons of bitches, when he speaks very highly of people who were marching in Charlottesville that we see were screaming Jews will not replace us, and marching with tiki torches, which is what people in Berlin did the day that Hitler became the chancellor. So that imagery is not lost on the players, and I think they are pissed off. And you saw the video that they posted. It was done by or coordinated by Michael Thomas, wide receiver for the New Orleans Saints, and it had pretty much all the young stars, African American stars of the NFL. And the NFL is 3/4 black, so they know that they have power they can wield, and I think they're starting to realize that because they demanded that the commissioner come out and express certain things, and he did that immediately. So the players have much more power than they realize, and I think they're starting to realize it. And we'll probably see much more of this to come in the future.
And in fact, Goodell says he's going to reach out to players who have raised their voices and others on how we can improve and go forward for a better and more united NFL family. That's his words. What changes would you want to see in the NFL?
Well, I think initially there's a lack of diversity when you're speaking about head coaches and front office management positions, particularly general managers. There's, I believe, only one minority owner, Mr. Khan of the Jacksonville Jaguars. So there needs to be a little more diversity in the ownership of the NFL. There needs to be much more diversity in the upper management, the senior levels of each NFL organization. And hopefully with the players pushing for this, the NFL will finally start to listen and not only, have the nice words, but also follow that with concrete actions.
I want to ask you about the controversy sparked by Drew Brees' initial comments this week, saying kneeling during the national anthem was disrespectful, comments he later apologized for and has since, doubled down in that apology. But, here's an example of someone who has had so many black athletes as teammates and friends, so many opportunities to learn about different experiences and perspectives, and yet there's a lack of understanding about their plight. What does that tell you?
Well, I think one of the things it tells me is that that it's a perfect encapsulation of what's been happening in this country, to where Drew Brees came out and he'd stuck with it. He'd had this position for since the beginning. So that wasn't surprising. But like you said, what's surprising was that he failed to listen to his teammates. He failed to listen to the rest of his NFL family when they had spoken out over and over again on the exact reasons why players were kneeling. And I think, even in the midst of the Colin Kaepernick backlash, with him not being able to resume his NFL career, and then subsequently the president of the United States and the language that he uses towards players saying maybe they shouldn't be in the country. Even in the midst of that, I think that he still didn't get it. But unfortunately, it took for a severe backlash. And I think now, hopefully, he'll start to try to educate himself and listen to a lot of what his teammates have been saying for the longest time. Not just his teammates, but guys around the league, other sports players that are respected, LeBron James. And I do think that, Drew will take this head on. You saw him respond to the president, and obviously he kind of had to do that. But I expect him to take these measures head on, because that is something that he understands he's going to have to do, especially being the quarterback in the city of New Orleans, where the black population is pretty heavy there.
I mean, we keep hearing from people who I've had on my air as guests, it's not just black people who can help this movement break through. It has to be white people too. And I think about these sports leaders. How important is it for sports leaders to really lead in a broader sense right now? Not just Drew Brees, not just LeBron James, not just, Colin Kaepernick and others who have made their names, but given American sports cross these cultural and ideological lines, it seems like there would be a huge opportunity there to help create a broader understanding.
Yeah, for far too long, people have looked at the issue of police brutality as a political issue, as a liberal versus conservative, left-wing versus right-wing conversation. And that's not at all what this is about. This is a human rights issue. And the rest of the world understands that, because we've seen marches in dozens of countries around the globe, from Tokyo to Oslo. I have a friend in Oslo who told me that they had the biggest demonstration in the history of their country in front of the parliament just yesterday. And 1,000 people went and gathered in front of the U.S. Embassy to protest. So this is happening all over the world. And people are understanding this is not a political issue. This is not an ideological issue. This is a human rights issue. And when you understand it on that level, then the humanity of seeing someone like George Floyd, pretty much essentially lynched, modern day lynching, tortured to death for 8 minutes, not being able to breathe, that really struck the hearts of, not just people in Minneapolis, not just people from coast to coast in this country, but around the globe. And no one wants to be on the wrong side of history. So I think Drew is starting to begin to understand that now. And I hope that not just him, but other sports athletes will continue to speak out, because this is one of the major issues of our time. And again, it's a human rights issue. It's not about politics.
Yeah. Dante Stallworth, thank you very much. I appreciate the thoughtful conversation, and great to have you with us. We'll be right back.
Constant hand washing causes hands to dry and crack. Try O'Keefe's Working Hands. It's America's #1 hand cream for guaranteed relief of dry, cracked hands. Also available in O'Keefe's for healthy feet. Guaranteed relief for extremely dry, cracked feet.
Introducing MyPhoto acrylic blocks. Now you can turn photos on your phone into amazing acrylic works of art. Starting at just $12, they're fun to collect and perfect to gift. Go to myphoto.com now for 20% off your first order plus free shipping.